Money and art career and faith. Wow, what a huge topic, but I'm going to try to do what I can. So the Lord gave me really two things to talk about today. And first of all, I want to acknowledge that I am speaking to you from the US, which is a completely different culture. And with that brings different conditions and those kinds of things. But even acknowledging that, I'm going to boldly say that this is not a matter of possibility, but it's a matter of resourcefulness, right? Especially for us as artists of faith. Uh, so, again, it's not a matter of possibility, it's a matter of resourcefulness. Um, so, two things that I wanted to talk to you guys about. I'm going to talk, first of all, kind of about the practical and then about the spiritual really quickly. So, the fact that it is about resourcefulness and not possibility, I was thinking about how you and I came to be sitting in front of each other, quote unquote. Just go with me. And what happened was I put my talents out there in the world so that they could be found, right? Um, and 80 found them. And then she reached out to me. First, she reached out to me through my website. I didn't realize it, but then she reached out to me again directly through my Instagram. So we are continents apart, oceans apart, and yet still we were able to connect with each other. And the first thing I want to say is, though you may be in South Africa or wherever you are not beholden to that economy only, should I say. Does that make sense? So just because that's where you are, that's not the only place that you can make a living, especially now when even continents and oceans away, we can drop into each other's inbox and connect, right? In a lot of ways, in so many wonderful ways, we live in a time where we can create opportunities for ourselves. We do not need gatekeepers to move our art forward. Now, I say that understanding we want to be presented by gatekeepers. Of course, I want famous dance companies to bring me in as a choreographer. Of course, you want the famous galleries to present you on the fancy flyers. Of course, we want that. But do we need that to move our art forward? No. So I think that's one thing when we're thinking about our career and money and moving it forward, is that you have the opportunity living in this time. I have the opportunity living in this time to create the kind of art world or art life that we want. We are only a click away. If I want to present my art, I can go rent some space. I can find a friend with a fancy house and say, can I present my art show in your house? And I can cheaply print some flyers and invite friends, right? So anything that I want to do, I can. It's a matter of resourcefulness, right? So I want to say that first. Okay, so with that, there are two places that I wanted to take you scripturally with that. So the first one is 1 Timothy 6 through 10, and I'm going to read this through the Amplified Version. And it says, but godliness actually is a source of great gain when accompanied by contentment. That contentment which comes from a sense of inner confidence based on the sufficiency of God. For we have brought nothing into the world, so it is clear we cannot take anything out of it either. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. But those who are not financially ethical and crave to get rich with a compulsive, greedy longing for wealth. They fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction, leading to personal misery. For the love of money, that is the greedy desire for it and the willingness to gain it unethically, is a root of all sorts of evil. And some by longing for it have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves through and through with many sorrows. So you and I are here, and we're talking about this relationship. How do I have an honorable relationship with money as an artist of faith? First of all, money is amoral. It's not good or bad. It's not really even real. It's a concept that we trade in. So money is not good or bad. It's your heart. What you do with money is the issue, right? It said, for those who are not financially ethical, those who crave to get rich, being rich is not a problem. The Bible is filled with examples where the Lord materially blessed his people. So having money, making money is not a problem, right? God says, I will teach you how to profit. So that's not the issue. It's what is your heart concerning money, right? Do you have a greedy desire for it? Are you building your identity on it so that you're making compromising choices to get it and to keep it? That's the problem, not having money. And so some of the things that I thought about for us to pray concerning this is, Lord, give me an honorable mindset about money. Heal my wounds and fears concerning money. Teach me how to use it the way it's supposed to be used and see it the way I'm supposed to see it. Because it's about putting money in its place, right? It's not about the money. The money is not the issue. It's your heart. Because even if it wasn't money and your heart was wrong, you'd abuse something else as well, right? So I want to encourage you that God doesn't have a problem with you having money. God doesn't even have a problem with you wanting to make money. You need it. You need it. Even to buy your art supplies, you need it. To give to somebody else, you need it. To buy food, you need it. It is a tool to get things done. When you make it anything more than that is when we get into trouble, right? So I encourage you to spend your time with the Lord. I've had to do it. I'm still doing it. But to let the Lord give you a healthy, fruitful mindset about this tool that happens to be money. The second thing that I want to read to you is from 2 Kings 4, and this is verses 1 through 7, and this is also the Amplified. And it says, now one of the wives of a man of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha for help. Elisha was the prophet. And the woman said, your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant reverently feared the Lord. But the creditor is coming to take my 2 sons to be his slaves in payment for a loan. Elisha the prophet said to her, what shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have of value in the house? She said, your maidservant has nothing in the house except a small jar of olive oil. Then he said, go borrow containers from all your neighbors, empty containers, and not just a few. Then you shall go in and shut the door behind you and your sons, and pour out the oil you have into all these containers, and you shall set aside each one when it is full. So the woman left him, and she shut the door behind her and her sons. They were bringing her the containers as she poured the oil. When the containers were all full, she said to her son, bring me another container. And her son said to her, there is not one left. Then the oil stopped multiplying. Then she came and told the man of God. And he said, go, sell the oil, pay your debts, and you and your sons can live on the rest. And I remember it was about 2014, 2015, my friend had said this verse really quickly, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I went to study it for myself, and the Lord showed me something. So this woman, really quickly, because I need to watch my time, but this woman, she had a financial need, right? Her husband had debts. They were coming to take her son. She needed money to pay for it. And so the prophet says to her, what do you have in your house? And she said, oil, right? So here's the first part of that revelation. This is your house, right? What do you have in your house? You have oil, you have gifts, abilities, talents, ideas, right? That's your oil. And so he tells her to go take that oil. He said, go borrow containers and pour the oil into the containers, right? So the second part of that revelation is, what are containers that you have at your disposal? Are they gift cards, t-shirts, merchandise, products, consulting, teaching, courses, books, right? Collaborations. What are the containers that you can pour your oil in? This gift for art, this gift for strategic thinking, this gift for planning. All of these are gifts, oil that you can pour. For me, those containers that I found were books, my podcast, choreographing for people, right? These were all containers that I could pour my oil into. And then the prophet tells her, after you've poured your oil into these containers, take it to the market and sell it. Don't hold it. Don't try to be humble and fake, because you're going to die poor, okay? Don't do that. Put it in the container and take it to market. If you're wondering if the Lord has a problem with you utilizing your gifts to meet your needs, here is the man of God showing you, the prophet of God showing you. God has no problem, right? He said, take it to market and pay your debts, and you will have enough to live on the rest, right? So here's what I did. I said, Lord, first of all, show me the oil I have at my disposal, because I didn't know at the time. What is my oil? Is it just dance? No, it's not. I can write, I can teach, right? I can build courses. I'm good on the computer. I've got all this stuff. So I asked him, what is my oil? And then the second thing was, what are the containers that I can use to house this oil so that I can transfer it, right, in transaction? And so he showed me, build a course, write this book, right, do this consulting, that kind of thing. And then there was enough. So I prayed, and I encourage you to pray. And I pray, Lord, give me witty ideas, because the Lord said he would. He'll give you witty ideas. He'll give you ideas that other people haven't seen or thought of. He'll give you interesting ways to market, right? Interesting ways to bring your product out, interesting ways to get connected to the people you need to get connected to move your art career forward. He's with you in this journey. So those are the two things that I quickly wanted to encourage you about, and that the Lord would continue to show you different channels of provision. And those change from season to season. Sometimes it's fully your art. Other times it's part your art, part other things. But all of these gifts that you have, these talents, these ideas, are at your disposal. Find containers and put them in. Do you do them all at once? No, you don't do them all at once. That's a conversation to go, Lord, which ones should I move on right now? Right? But remember the parable of the talents and how the man was mad when the one man who didn't do anything with his talent, right? The Bible says, Jesus, he said, go do business till I come. So get out there and start doing business. Amen.
I love it. Thanks so much, Orlina. I love it. Um, just like, so my first response, because I love, like, it really felt like you were speaking to me. I mean, I've got all of these questions. Um, what would you say, like, because I know you made a shift from being in full-time ministry, I think, to moving more into the arts as a vocation, and like almost the arts for its own sake. What do you think was the role of money there, or how did it shift?
So even in ministry, you need money to do ministry. You've got to get to the place, you've got to pay for gas. You know, I had to buy music. I needed places to rehearse. I had to pay for the garments that I danced in. And so there was nothing wrong with me asking to be paid for what the Lord gave me. And so one of the things that was really interesting, I will say, I was looking at one of the questions and it said, can we take objects offered to God through our artistic practice and sell them? And and I wrote, my worship happens everywhere I go. I'm, I am the temple of the living God. You are the temple of the living God. And we often think about offering things to God, but this is a gift that the Lord gave you out of his love for you and said, I give it to you as a tool, use it. So just because I take my gift into another context doesn't mean that my worship has changed. My life is a worship, not just my piece of art. My life is a worship, right? Um, and if my life is a worship and I can't make any money, well, I'm gonna have a hard time. You know what I mean? Like practically it just doesn't even make sense. Do you know what I'm saying? So that didn't change. Now, when I was in ministry, there were times where the Lord said, ask for this. And there were times when the Lord said, just tell them whatever is on their heart and I'll deal with them about what to give you. And I think that's the one thing that is, you know, uh, that we be led by the Spirit of God in various transactions, even when we're out in the marketplace, because we don't know what that transaction is going to lead to next. And sometimes it's not about that transaction that we're in, it's about something bigger. And so that's why, even when we're out in the marketplace, it's good to be led. Did I answer that, AD?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, ministry is kind of a interesting world in itself.
But you're in ministry right now though.
Yeah,
Like
it's true.
ministry is not just in one context. The actual ministry that we have, according to 2 Corinthians 5, right, is reconciliation. That's the ministry he gave us. All of these other things that we do are just ways that we achieve reconciliation or work towards reconciliation. So reconciliate ministry is not just reconciling other people to God, it's reconciling you to God and parts of you, your financial life to God, your relationship life to God, your sexual life to God, right? Your ambition heart to God, your career life. Like all of those are ministry just as much as you leading somebody to Christ. So reconciliation is our ministry. All of these other things are ways that we engage in that ministry.
I think I know what the answer is going to be, but you don't think that ambition in itself is unchristian, or um, yeah, wanting to grow your career or be recognized or be seen. I think what you
No. Why would it be? Why would it be a sin for excellent people, because the Bible says the people of God are the excellent ones, why would it be a sin for excellent people to want to be excellent? Right? Ambition is not a problem. Wanting to be recognized for your work is human, right? It's what you're willing to do to get it. It's the place you give it in your life, right? If you make ambition your God, then it's sinful. But ambition in itself, wanting to have a career, wanting to have a successful career, is just a desire of your heart. But you hold that with an open hand. And at the end of the day, Lord, this is what I desire. But even more than that, I desire whatever you have for me. And if you say go left, then I'll go left. If you tell me to go right, I'll go right. Right? Giving ambition a wrong place is when I want this and I'm willing to do anything to get it. That's a heart issue. But just wanting to be excellent, wanting to be recognized for your excellence, is just a desire of a human being. And God will be in that with you.
Chris, is there something you would want to just respond to quickly?
Mainly just applause and gratitude for that talk. And I think the resourcefulness thing is yeah, like a really powerful kind of reminder, you know, that I think we do have like we've been blessed with talents, and we do have a responsibility to be great stewards of those talents, to be good and faithful servants, and to then receive the blessing of the master for what we've done with those talents. I really applaud the call for resourcefulness, 100%.
Yeah. And I think it's amazing, even within this network that you guys have, what you could help each other achieve just by and through the collaborations. Do you know what I'm saying? To help each other move forward in honorable ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my prayer is that artists of faith not be afraid of good things. It's it's good, right? In Genesis, where's my Bible? In Genesis 12, when who was that? Was that Abraham? I should know this. This is terrible. when he when he takes him away and he says, "I'll bless you," right? When he tells him, I'm trying to look for it, but he says, "I'll bless you. I'll make your name great," right? That's fame. That's recognition. He tells them, "I'll bless you with these things that for whatever reason we're afraid of." It's the pursuit. Mm-mm, mm-mm. It's not even the pursuit of them. It's the way we pursue them that becomes an issue. It's the place we give them in our lives that become an issue. If I'm not okay unless I'm number one, that's a problem because my identity is built on that. And when my identity is built on that, then I'm willing to do anything to keep that identity. Whether that means I compromise my faith, whether that means I disobey God, whether that means I trample on another person, because that is what my identity is built on. That's what my value is built on. That's what becomes problematic, not the fact that you happen to be number one or that you worked hard to get there.
It's related to the problem of perfectionism.
Yeah.
Can I strive to be the best I possibly can be, knowing that I'm never going to reach perfection, and I shouldn't be upset when I can't. I should be able to back away from something before it's, in my mind, perfect. because I
Right.
know God has made it that way.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it's
I
almost like, I'm sorry, Chris, I didn't mean to talk over you.
No, not at all. I was just going to say, I love that you brought up identity and now that Charles has spoken about perfectionism, because
Mhm.
I think that they're very closely intertwined. And sometimes our identity then becomes the performance of achieving perfection, as opposed to mirroring Christ or embodying, Christ in the world. And I think that once our identity becomes firmly rooted in Christ, there's this incredible God-centered confidence that takes us over. And I think that, you know, um, to be like a city on a hill or a lamp that's not covered up then becomes manifested in every aspect of our lives. Um, and I love it when I read books ranging across different disciplines, and I just see God's wisdom scattered in like profound quote unquote claims that these authors are making. But all of
Right.
these riches of wisdom have been hidden in him forever. And we as like his like children have such an access to that and such a privilege and a calling to then present that to the world, I believe. And
Yeah.
that confidence in our identity then becomes the enabling factor that breaks through these sort of barriers which we would otherwise face.
And I think that's so powerful because from what you've just said and what Charles said, it's I act this way because of who I am, right? I am made in his image. I am excellent in his image, so I act excellent. Not this is what makes me who I am. Mm-mm. The career doesn't make me who I am. The success doesn't make me who I am. I work this way because I already am excellent in him. And I'm just acting out of who I am, which is different.
I think another part of the whole identity thing is, for some reason, we feel that if we're not doing art full time, we're not being excellent. And I think the practical pressures of life doesn't enable us to do it full time. And like, I don't think there's any shame in having another job. And I
Right.
don't, yeah, that's once again of where do you get your confidence? Is it in this idea of being an artist, having a studio? Because if you can't afford those things, I mean, you're still excellent. You still have the gifts, and yeah.
So the only thing I'll say, because I also must be careful of not dominating, I'm going to speak later, but it's funny. I watched this interview with quite a well-known American artist, and I can find the interview if anyone wants to watch it. But he was basically saying like, the joke goes that when you're an up and coming artist working a day job, you make your art at night, you work your job during the day. And when you're a quote unquote professional artist with a studio, you work your day job during the day and you make your art at night. So because the demands of running a studio or doing whatever are in many ways contradictory or even distracting from
From the art.
what an artistic practice is at its core.
Mhm.
So I guess you just got to pick which hill upon which you wish to die, and yeah, pick your battles. But yeah, I want to hear what other people think of that.
And I was just going to respond in just a very brazen US American. Who cares? Like, who cares what other people think? At the end of the day, you are not paying my bills, right? I mean, because those kind of ideas and thoughts, they're changing all the time. They're shifting all the time. And if you're managing yourself based on these opinions, like that has nothing to do with how you live your art career. Now, the human side of you with the heart of flesh, yeah, you might deal with some insecurities, and I totally get that. Of like, I'm not doing this full time. I even think about that because for me, I say, do I call myself a professional choreographer? Because I don't do it full time. I do all these other things. and they say you're not a professional unless you make money full time on that. So I said, okay, well, do I make money full time through my choreography? Well, no, because that was an intentional choice I made. I don't want to be on the hamster wheel of cranking out choreography all the time and jumping from gig to gig to gig. I have other things to do, right? But do I make a living from my creativity? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because all the things that I'm doing come out of my creativity. So you may not like it, you may have an opinion about it, but you can take your opinion and go have a cup of tea. That has nothing to do with me, right? In the end, at the end of the day, there's nothing that I'm doing what the Lord showed me was possible for my life. So and sometimes, my little heart gets hurt, but that's all right. I get over it and then I keep it moving.
Yeah, I guess we're all comfortable with different things. So I told myself, like, you get doctors, like medical doctors, who don't want to get, say, for instance, paid for their services. So they work for Doctors Without Borders, or they work for an NGO, and they get funded by outside people. And then you get people who have a practice, and you pay every time you go to the doctor. Neither of those doctors aren't doctors, because the one gets paid, the other one gets funded, the other one has a NPO status or whatever. I think it really depends, like, what you're comfortable with, and kind of being true to what you said, being true to you.
Yeah.
Um, for me, I prefer to have two streams in my work. I have more commercial work, which I feel I'm not that invested in, and then I have my personal work, which I feel I care deeply about, and I feel that's really me in there. And I'm okay to split those, because I feel I'm protecting myself in a way by sorry, by almost splitting the, or taking the financial pressure off my own work. I feel I'm actually allowing myself more space to play. So that's the way I do it, and how I protect myself. And I think Chris would have a different way, or Heidi would have a different way of making this work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I talk all big and bad now like I don't have a care in the world, but this took me a while to get to. Like, when I say a while to, it took a while to get to. It was the Lord showing me who I was. It was me stepping out with my knees shaking and no confidence, but I did it anyway. And then my confidence was built as I moved and as the Lord showed me who I was, and I moved and good things happened and I moved, right? So it is a process because we are human beings, we are social beings. And so, of course, like I said in the beginning, you want to be accepted by your community, your artistic, you want to be affirmed. There's nothing wrong with that. Um, and sometimes they will, and sometimes they won't, just as long as you don't let that stop you moving forward. Because wanting it has nothing to do with the possibility of you moving your work forward.
Marlita, are you going to stick around for Chris's talk, or should we?
I'm going to try to. I have to teach a class at 1. So,
Okay.
um, so I'm going to try to, but please invite me back. I'll shush. But
We'd
I want
love
to
to.
get to
We'd
know
love
you
to.
guys.
Yeah, sorry. Most people's videos are off, but
That's
they're.
okay. I see names. Hello.
Yay! We'll do this again. But yeah, for now, please stick around. And yeah, Chris, we'd love to hear what you have to say. And yeah.
Sure. Um, I mean, just does anyone have any questions for Marlita in case she needs to run off, and they can be answered now. And if not, I'll happily go ahead. But just let me know. Anybody? Okay. All right. So Haiti started off with a little bit of pressure by asking for words of wisdom. And so I'm butchering a partial quote from the guy who I'm butchering a lot from tonight, Lewis Hyde. So whatever good is here in this talk is given back to my ancestors, and whatever wisdom found here is not my own. So greetings, everyone. I'm a contemporary South African artist, and I work in an abstract sculptural mode utilizing found objects. So I've basically taken what exists and simply represented it. I do not alter the essence or color of my materials to make my sculptures, although sometimes I cheat by burning the material to give it a darker tone. So hence my opening line, because I do still very much feel like any wisdom I might have, I have indeed borrowed from my ancestors, both those living and perhaps very, very distantly related to me, and those ancestors who have passed and whose ideas I have been able to glean from. So this is, in a sense, a found object talk. And as such, I'd like to start with introducing some of the themes from The Gift, which is a book by Lewis Hyde. It was initially published and subtitled The Imagination and the Erotic Life of Property. Yeah, shout out, look at this book club, what's up? And it's currently published under the subtitle How the Creative Spirit Transforms the World. So let the butchering commence. We're going to try and do this. I'm just going to jump right in because there's a bit of reading that I want to get to. So I'm going to try and give that the bulk of time. But there's a cover quote by Zadie Smith, and who says, "Our most precious possessions are not for sale, and the greatest contracts are achieved without anyone signing on the dotted line." And I love that kind of as a little intro to the book. Lewis Hyde is and I am using this book as a jumping off point. So I'm recommending it. I think it's fascinating. It's broadened my horizon. And I think across the board, I know people now that I've read it, I know people who are in business or people who are in other fields of the arts or people who are engineers or, economists, and they've read this book and come away fascinated by it. So 10 out of 10 would recommend. And Lewis Hyde's central premise is that works of art exist simultaneously within two economies, the market economy on the one hand and the gift economy on the other hand. And his claim, I think at the end of the day, is that only one of these is essential, though. The work of art can survive without the market, but where there is no gift, there is no art. And there are several distinct senses of this gift that lie behind his ideas from what I've been able to, understand. But common to each of them is the notion that a gift is a thing that we do not get by our own efforts. We cannot buy it. We cannot acquire it through an effort of the will. It is bestowed upon us. And so thus we rightly speak of talent as a gift, for although talent can be perfected through an effort of the will, no effort in the world can cause its initial appearance. And I think that this is so pertinent to believers in particular who have, new life through grace, because I feel that we have kind of the inside track on this way of thinking. God has always snuck us in and given us the eyes to see what, in a few passages, it would call what the wise often cannot. And I also want to note how I've found how Lewis Hyde uses much Christian language, but always keeps it open, always keeps it accessible. And I think that in Christ's time, his use of language was rather similar or focus on the accessible part of it. And that's why I think he was able to successfully draw so many to himself that were initially outside the fold or outside of the religious sort of circles of the day. So, the question of what is actually happening in an artist's work is a very nuanced one. For painters, it's about the paint, but it's not about the paint. In my work, it's about the toothpicks, but it's not about the toothpicks. And I think it's kind of funny in relationships, couples will sometimes argue about chores around the house, but it's not about the chores around the house. It's about the spirit in which the chores are done. And I think in this way, it's no coincidence that the gift, the book was subtitled How the Creative Spirit Transforms the World. And for the creative living and working within this world of buying and selling, how to maintain yourself alive in this world where the essence of what you do, which is the spirit, cannot be bought or sold, is the central question of the gift. But yeah, I think just to go back to that language point, I've personally found it incredibly important to spend time developing and finessing the language around my practice so that I avoid falling into either sentimental faith cliches on the one hand, or international art English on the other. But at all times, there's kind of a rhetoric that's accessible. And that's not to say that I'm against jargon, because I think jargon is a symbol of a community that's formed around a common interest. But I'm very interested in allowing others to access that community as well. So just a couple more points, and yeah, I hope you're bearing with me. So I think just to kind of wrestle with this initial introduction to this idea of the gift that Lewis Hyde is presenting us with. If the work of art is the emanation of its maker's gift, and if it is received by its audience as a gift, then is it to a gift? And I think one of the things that's helpful is he doesn't kind of like make it so black and white. He says perhaps, but it's not so categorical. Even if the work of art contains the spirit of the artist's gift, it does not follow that the work itself is then a gift. It is what we make of it. And I think the we then is the audience. And yet it must be added that how we treat a thing can sometimes change its nature. So I think that, this is an interesting point because for myself within the world of contemporary art, there's often this attributing of monetary value to things. How much is this work selling for? What's happening on the auction world? And I think part of the challenge for artists working within that realm today is to maintain the spirit of the gift without letting it become defined by those circles in which it could circulate. So I think that's the idea of like maybe changing the way we think about it, and then we can change the way we treat the thing in order to change its nature. One of the key characteristics that Lewis Hyde outlines about the gift is that it must be in motion. So a gift received must be given again. And like the fairy stories of bread given on a day, which must be eaten the same day or it turns to stone, a gift that is not in motion dies. Not only that, though, the gift that is not given by the recipient then often becomes the quote unquote death of the recipient, whether that's physical or spiritual death. And there's grim fairy tales galore about that. And I'm, thinking here also about the parable of the talents. That servant that stilled the flow of the water, if we think about the servant that didn't like do anything with his talents, resulted in its stagnation and ultimately his demise. Whereas the servants who kept the gift on the move, multiplied it, they were the ones that were found faithful. So I've been fascinated by how this author utilizes this rhetoric of the gift. And I think just fascinates me. Sorry, I'm actually trying to change my, okay, there we go, because I couldn't hear myself, my settings. Sorry about that. All right. So this idea of motion, I think, is interesting. And I've been trying to think about that, especially in relation to money, because one of the points that he makes about, he looks deeply into anthropological studies of like societies, tribal societies, small communities, cultures, even modern communities like the scientific community, where contributors to editorials don't get paid for their contributions. If a scientist contributes a paper and it gets published, usually his or her backing institution, so the university usually would be the one who gets remunerated, but not the scientists themselves. And there's something there about this implicit acknowledgement that the knowledge is part of the commons, and that any knowledge attained is knowledge built upon the back of knowledge that exists. So yeah, it's fascinating to think about that. But in the contemporary world, specifically with money, I've been thinking about how money can be kept in motion. And I think it's incredible that one of the things that God commands his people to do is to tithe. And tithing, I think, in the biblical understanding of the term, is like a 10% that's given to either the church, the temple, or different charities in different ways with community. But it's basically offering back to the Lord, recognizing that everything that's been received is due to the Lord, and so that 10% is an acknowledgement of that. So tithing for me has been one of the ways in which I've tried to think of keeping the gift in motion. I've also always been fascinated by gangster movies, or these kind of like crime thriller movies where drug dealers will fund operations under the radar, washing money, stuff like that. And I sometimes chuckle because I think that for like one of my privileges, or like fascinations, is within the art world. I kind of see how I take like art world money and then funnel it out of it into different avenues. And yeah, I think that's one of the ways in which we could keep the gift on the move. And I love how God has already built that into his plan financially for his people. So I guess the choice is whether to keep the gift moving or to be eaten by the gift. And Walt Whitman has this line in one of his poems where he says, "The gift is most to the giver and comes back most to him. It cannot fail." So there's something about the giver giving the gift and being blessed in that process. So in the world of spirit and the world of gift, you can literally have your cake and eat it too, in a sense, or give your cake and eat it too, would be a better way of putting it. There's no way that I'm gonna, in the time frame we have, touch on everything in the book. So I've just been like, I don't know, dropping a little bit of hints, because there's something about like the way that he's positioning this idea of thinking about gift economies that has really changed the way I've been thinking about artistic practice in general. But when I was thinking about what was one of the most things for me about this book, it was actually his retelling of a fairy tale, and then his kind of analysis of that fairy tale. So I thought I'd read it to you. And the fairy tale is perhaps quite well known. I remember it somewhere in the back of my mind when I reread it here, and I think I encountered it as a child. But a fascinating one. It's in a tale in which we are perhaps all familiar: the shoemaker and the elves. A shoemaker is down on his luck and has only enough leather to sew a single pair of shoes. He cuts the leather out and goes to bed, planning to sew the shoes in the morning. During the night, two naked elves come and make the shoes. The shoemaker is speechless with astonishment when he finds them. Not a stitch is out of place. The shoes are such a masterpiece that the first customer to appear in the morning pays handsomely for them. And the cobbler now has enough money to buy leather for 2 pairs of shoes. That night, he cuts the leather out and goes to bed. Again in the morning, the shoes are made, and again they sell for such a price as to afford the leather for 4 pairs of shoes. In this way, the shoemaker soon prospers. One evening, not long before Christmas, as the tale says, the cobbler suggests to his wife that they stay up and see who has been helping them. They leave a candle burning, hide behind some curtains, and at midnight see the elves come in and set to work. In the morning, the wife says to the shoemaker, "Those little men have made us rich, and we should show our gratitude for this. They're running about with nothing on and might freeze. I'm going to make them each a shirt, coat, jacket, trousers, and a pair of stockings. Why don't you make them each a pair of little shoes?" Willingly agrees, and one night when the clothes are finished, he lays them out on the bench in place of the leather. He and his wife hide behind the coats to watch. The elves are surprised and pleased to find the clothes. They put them on and sing, "We're sleek, we're fine, we're out the door, we shan't be cobblers anymore." And they dance around the room and away. They never return. But everything continues to go well with the shoemaker, and he prospers at whatever he takes in hand. So Lewis Hyde then goes on to give a little bit of an analysis of this tale, and I loved it because, you know, as with the Gospels, one of the most exciting things about fables and parables is when the teacher explains them. And this is Hyde's interpretation. I'm just going to touch on a few points. He says the tale is a parable of a gifted person. It describes the time between the initial stirrings of a gift, when it is potentially ours, and the releasing of a gift, when it is actually ours. In this case, the gift is the man's talents carried by the elves. The shoemaker is poor to begin with. His own worth is not available to him for some reason that is never explained. But then, while he is asleep, it begins to come. The process is always a bit mysterious. You work at a task, you work, and still it won't come right. Then when you're not even thinking about it, while you're potting around in the garden or taking a shower or cooking up a dinner, the whole thing pops into your head and missing grace is bestowed. That's the elves, the magic touch by which our tasks take on life. The process does not end there, however, for the elves have need of us as well. It is a curious detail in the story that these elves are so skilled with the needle and thread, but are unable to make themselves some clothes. But that seems to be the case. Their outfits and above all their freedom depend on the shoemaker's recognition and gratitude. What can we make about the initial nudity of the elves, the clothes they are given and the result of that gift? To put clothes on a thing is a kind of acknowledgement, like giving it a name. By this act, we begin to differentiate what was undifferentiated. Sometimes we are unable to escape from a bad mood, for example, until we have correctly articulated the feeling. Articulation allows a slight gap to open between the feeling and the self, and the gap permits the freedom of both. In this story, the clothes realize the gift. That is, they make it real, make it a thing, the clothing of the thing, the naming of a thing. And note that the shoemaker makes his first pair of shoes within the tale in order to dress the elves. It is this last act. Now he is a changed man. Now he has worth that can be communicated. The shoes he makes are a return gift which simultaneously accomplishes his own transformation and frees the elves. And that is why I say that at the end of the labor of gratitude is similarity with the gift or its donor. Now the man is a real shoemaker as the elves were on the first night. And so the conclusion he reaches is that a gift isn't fully realized until it is given away then. And those who will not acknowledge gratitude or refuse to labor in its service neither free their gifts nor really come to possess them. As a parable for a gifted person, the shoemaker and the elves is also a parable for artists. Most artists early on find themselves in the position of the shoemaker on that first night. A talent has appeared, but it's naked, immature. Ahead lie the years of reciprocal labor, which precede the release of an unaccomplished gift. So I think it was the retelling of that tale and the sort of analysis of it that really started to unlock something for me. And it just so happened that I'm reading another book at the moment called The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. It's actually a business book. I'm not, it's not, it wasn't recommended to me by an artistic person actually, which I think I highly recommend to anyone to read like widely and broadly. And it's fascinating because the premise of this lean startup guy is he's like, the problem with a lot of startups at the moment, is craze around startups and the tech industry is that everyone's focused on creating this perfect product. So you get an amazing team together, the best people in the world. You do all your analysis, all your market research. Product is, perfected, hits the factory line, and it goes out into the world. But he says that so many startups are failing that there's something wrong in that process. And he kind of recommends the approach that it's much better to start out small, put an incomplete product out into the world, see what the feedback is, start these conversations, get this network going. And he actually quite stipulates that you should get paying customers from the get-go, even on an incomplete product, and get that ball rolling in the real world. So it's been fascinating to me how, I'm seeing these business books, then replicating what I've started to see within an artistic practice, and not always on the business side, but also sometimes just within the logic and the economy of the studio as an ecosystem. But I think there's a couple of like interesting points here that I want to like also pull out. Is that at the beginning of the tale, the shoemaker's poor and it doesn't look like there's a lot going for him, but he only has enough leather to sew a single pair of shoes. And that goes back to, I think, Marlita's points about like, what is your oil? So what do you have on hand? He cuts the leather out and goes to bed. But there's something there about, so he actually cuts the leather out. You have to be like, you have to get the hands dirty. You have to be in the practice and like in the work for the inspiration to come later. I've often said to people, like, I'm not an artist that like thinks up art. Like any good idea I've had for art is come from another idea or come from the work itself. Like there's this idea of being like hands-on, and the work becomes generative in itself, which Lewis Hyde, I think, would then go back to argue that the work representing the gift then bears gifts to other gifts. It stays in motion. That motion, that generative nature of the gift gives birth to other gifts. But I think it's fascinating. So he cuts the leather out. He's at work, goes to bed, and then we know that Lewis Hyde looks at the nighttime, and the nighttime is this realm of the unconscious. And within the unconscious, the gift starts to be and arrives naked initially, like the elves, starts to be nurtured, and then ultimately, at the end of the tale, leaves the unconscious and enters the physical reality fully clothed and able to stand on its own two legs. But fascinating that he wakes up in the morning, shoes are done. The shoemaker is speechless with astonishment when he finds them. But that speechlessness with astonishment doesn't then stop him from selling those pairs of shoes to the first customer that walks in. So there's this kind of immediate engagement within the ecosystem of his moments. He hasn't been taken those shoes and hidden them away, or taken those shoes and like pondered them for months. There's this idea of like immediately moving that within the circulation of the moments. So, and then actually that last point, sorry, while I'm busy unpacking this last point about him actually making a little pair of shoes for the elves. And within the confines of the story, that's the first time that we actually see the shoemaker making shoes himself, is a fascinating point, because there is this thing, and I used to hear very experienced and established artists talking about this in their work, where they would speak about how you have to make work for the sake of the work. There's this integrity that needs to be at the heart of practice. And I would always sweat and be very concerned, because I never knew how to reconcile that with the reality that I was going through, because I was making work and truly invested in the work and trying to make work on the terms that the work demanded. But then I wasn't ever 100% content or pleased or found the work perfect before I sent it out into the world. Oftentimes, I mean, there's been some occasions, and I have tried to set in place like rules that I don't ever do this again. But I've sometimes made works lying flat, because that's how I usually work in the studio, and sent them out into the world without actually having hung them up on the wall, and only then seen pictures of them sent to me later in other contexts, wherever they are. And I don't recommend that as a strategy to anyone. Firstly, it's absolutely terrifying. But there's something about him, having going not only with cutting the leather out and being part of the process, but then making sure that finished work has a life beyond that space where it was created. And I think the beauty of parables and fables is that the mystery of what that space beyond is completely up to you. So for some it would be a gallery, and for others it could be something completely different. But then there is a point later that I've been very happy to reach, where I have actually made work purely for the sake of making that work. and I've seen that as a privilege, and it's been very affirming to me to read like a story like this, and see that moment only happened much later in the process for him. So the shoes were selling and his business was thriving, but he made the first sort of sacrifice back to the gift only much later down the road. And I think there's something about that that's important, because to make that sacrifice back to the gift, to give a gift back to the source of the gift, takes many, many years of dedicated labor, dedicated work. And I think that sometimes as artists, we, especially as Christian artists, if any of you like want to identify that way, we put so much pressure on ourselves, giving an artistic gift back to the giver of all gifts, back to God, and doing our practice in service of Him. And I think that can sometimes like stifle us, the pressure to make that like ultimate gift that gives it back to Him. And so we don't even do we don't even get going with the hundreds of pairs of shoes that need to be done before we're able to even make that first pair of shoe that's worthy of being returned to the gift. So I'm just kind of leaving this very kind of strange fable with you guys, and yeah, it does leave something. And I guess the encouragement is kind of similar to my leaders, and that resourcefulness and getting going. But anyways, I do want to end with some recommendations. I love it when other speakers give recommendations, so I'm just going to shoot. First off, this guy right here, The Gift by Lewis Hyde. There's also a YouTube talk, The Gift, a lecture and conversation with Lewis Hyde and Robin McKenna. And I'm actually going to copy and paste this in for everyone into the chat, so that everyone can get it. And there's actually a little, I don't know if anyone can pull it up, but I'll also just share it again. There's a little meme that I came across that I kind of chuckle at, because the way I encountered this book was through the writer Academy X, which I also recommend. It's on that list. It's thank you, AD, appreciate that. It's two little kings walking along and saying, no one laughs at my library of self-help books now anymore. Because in Academy X, which is basically a textbook written with a compilation of essays by other artists who are writing as if writing essays that they wish they'd received in the journey of their artistic practice. So it's like a lecture to a young self, or a lecture to a young audience of wannabe artists. And even if you're not like wanting to pursue an art career, I found this a really rich resource and absolutely fascinating. I've been reading that book continually for the last like 4 or 5 years, just as a reference. There's one essay in there by an artist called Carol Bove, and she put up this meme, and she recommended such a crazy like array of books, from The 5-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss, all 4 specifically artists. She says that's an interesting one, thinking about time management. The Lean Startup is another one that I've mentioned in this. She mentioned The Gift, and then she also mentioned The Artist's Way, which I know some of you have already encountered. So yeah, I've kind of just tried to, there was no way I was going to be able to summarize this gift. And I think I wanted to plant that and just say that my policy as an artist regarding business was to get on the bike and get some momentum, because once the momentum's going, you can stay on the bike and you can make turns and you can move. But if you're sitting still to turn, to position yourself, you're bound to fall over. So there's something about gaining momentum. There's something about getting hands on, cutting out the leather. And even if you have to then go to sleep because you don't know what to do with it. And so I really encourage kind of just a courageous, and I hope it's a the Lord blesses you with that courage just to get going and see what he blesses once you're on the move. And then to kind of have also the courage to educate yourself along the way, and to see what comes, and how he opens doors and how he provides for you, how those jars manifest themselves, that the oil can keep on pouring. And I'm very happy to answer any practical questions, and any specific questions that you might have, but I thought that might be a helpful intro. So
that's super cool, Chris. Thank you
floor
so
is
much.
open.
I actually asked Chris to speak about this book because I read it recently, and it was also quite, I want to say life-changing, but I think it's just we live in a very commercialized world where we see trade and the market as these like kind of big, almost scary things that's hanging over our heads. And Lewis Hyde is proposing that if we think about art more as gift giving, there's something so relational, there's something so organic and natural about gift giving. We as humans have been doing that for centuries, millennia actually, and it's something easier to wrap your head around. So do go check it out if you'd like to think about it. While you're thinking about questions for Chris, because I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. So much is something I thought of myself is I think we put so much pressure on ourselves as artists because we are little one-man businesses, right? And a business usually has a team, someone to do this, someone to do this. And we kind of expect ourselves to be able to do all of those things. If you're not great at marketing and you don't like marketing your work, that's okay. Like, you're not a born marketing person, like not everyone is. Or if you struggle to work with clients, which is something I don't actually like being partaking or being involved with the actual sale. I hate that. So I get someone else to do it. Like, almost, I stopped expecting myself to be able to take all of the roles that are needed to work this business process from its beginning to its end. I've got my role in my place in that process, and then I just delegate, whether it's a gallery, whether it's an agent or a friend, or I ask my dad to, take that painting to that person. Yeah, I mean, there's ways, there's ways of actually honoring yourself and knowing what parts you like of the process and which parts you don't like, and kind of being okay with that. Yeah, anyway, that's just the thought.
No, I love that, AD. Thanks for that. And I think we as artists have like a lot more currency in the world than we give ourselves credit for. And sometimes money, it's not about money. Like, to think of ourselves as a business is a nice framework to think of ourselves as, because there's so many facets to an artistic practice. But I mean, sometimes there's social currency, friendships that we've made, like your relationship with your dad, other people. I have someone who helps me with press sometimes, and I made a deal for an artwork in the end with that person because I couldn't afford their. I've done that. Always that simple either, but yeah. I think the interesting thing about, and I would encourage people also to like have a look at this book, because he's not saying that artworks can't exist within the market economy. He's just saying there's a spirit to them, and there are certain attributes that align artworks in their nature with gift exchange economies, in the way that they create relationships, in the way that they gain value as they are in motion. But there's also pros and cons to all of that, because in the giving of a gift is often a sense of obligation that's then created within that relationship. So within some relationships, it's not a good idea to give gifts. And that's where this like kind of market exchange, like if we were walking on the street and we were coffee, but there had to be like this entire relational entanglement with whoever's serving us coffee. By the time we made it to midday, like we would have had 100 conversations, and like we would never have gone anywhere. So there is some beauty to the way our world is structured. But I found it incredibly illuminating. And I encourage everyone to bring the same creativity and confidence that you have in your work to your practice at large.
Questions for Chris, comments. Doesn't have to relate to the book.
Yeah, doesn't at all.
Can I make a comment quick? Hi guys, I'm Tara. Thanks so much,
Hi.
Chris. And I know Melita's not here anymore. And thanks, Edie, for organizing. I think, Edie, I loved your question earlier about, not your question, though, like the thing that you brought up about when you're not a full-time artist, like feeling that, are you actually successful? And I think it's so interesting because I'm an art teacher and I've been teaching now for almost 12 years. And for a long time, I was like, I didn't make art for quite a while. And I found like the kind of getting this, there was so much stuff I was putting on myself, like all these barriers and these expectations that were so unrealistic. Like you're saying now, just start with something and do something and take your gift and go with it. And I think I'd allowed like a lot of just previous comments, and like I've read most of The Artist's Way, and people that have basically become were you allowed to be kind of enemies of your creativity, and to kind of like block that and break it down. And I think what's really interesting is sometimes people think that teachers, it's like you couldn't make it in the real world, so therefore you're a teacher. Like, and I think that sometimes the way that people treat teachers, or even just the perception, I think in terms of even what we earn as teachers, like you're giving so much, and if you're a good teacher and you really are, like you're building people's lives, like you're doing this really, really important role. And I think it can be, I don't know if maybe other people don't have the same thought, but for myself, like I saw the fact that I wasn't a fully practicing artist, and I have subsequently in the last few years been making more of my own work, although I'm not, I still kind of, I guess, battle against some of those expectations and that perfectionism thing. And also like what you said, Chris, about startups and like starting with something and being completely authentic and be like, this isn't a perfect product and we're going to make it better. And that's actually completely fine. And it's not about this like perfectionism, and a lot of, a lot of what's in the world is so fake because it's put out there as being perfect, and in reality it's not. It's like it's a fraud. It's like a fake version of it. It's like a cheaper kind of mass-produced version that you're paying a lot of money for, thinking like this thing is worth it, and in reality it's not really. Anyway, but what I wanted to say was I think like for myself realizing, and this took me a very long time to realize, that actually in teaching, I have this gift. And what my leader said about creativity was so cool earlier. Like we're all using our creativity in different ways, and we all are creative beings, having been made in the image of God. And I think what's so cool is as a teacher, you kind of not birthing, but you're drawing out the gift in each student, and you're saying like, hey, look, there's a gift in you, like this is your strength, and and like I want to help you grow that thing. And then there's recognizing the beauty of that gift and kind of gaining satisfaction from seeing this thing. Oh, I can do this thing, and this is something that can add value to my life and to the world and whatever. And I think the analogy of the gift is so cool because I think it brings a life to the artwork. It's like sometimes if we see the artwork as just being a commodity and like an object, then as you say, it doesn't have that same spirit to it. But in actual fact, like you're bringing like years of experimentation and ideas and everything and pouring it into this piece, and this artwork represents so much more than like the actual object that it is in itself. And even with, I haven't actually seen your work, Chris, but highly recommended it, and I definitely want to see your exhibition. But I think that also the idea of like bringing found objects together and creating something out of small things, or creating something larger is very much a picture of what it is that we do with our lives. Like we take all these little experiences and like these things that we find and things we hear. And I also like that you acknowledge that all your wisdom is not from yourself. It's like things that you've gleaned from others. And I think just like that humility of we've been given this, like we've been given these talents, we've been given these gifts, and all we need to do is do something with them. It's actually not, it's not even like a difficult, if in itself, there can be obstacles and we can make it very complicated and we have to earn a living. But if you're doing something with that gift and you're investing it and you're trying to make it go further, then as you said earlier, like the gift becomes more gifts. It like, it like multiplies itself. which is such a cool, like there's so many amazing like analogies, and like you can get quite like, you know, deep with like the symbolism and everything else. But I think like repackaging the artwork and the art making process and all of this is as a gift is so important, because it, you know, it makes it so much more special and something that really does have a lot of value within itself.
Yeah, love everything you said, for sure. And I think that I also think it's amazing that you have the opportunity to sow into, you know, kids' lives and support yourself financially through that, because if you do then end up making work that liberates you to make such radical work, because you on that work. So I think there's such a beautiful potential, like fearlessness that could come from your situation, looking at it in that light. So yeah, I just wish you all the best. Very exciting.
Anyone else? Some other comments? I do agree with Chris. I think if we think the only way of being an artist is by earning a living just by your art, that places such an amount of pressure on your work. And it actually, yeah, we are free beings. We are free in Christ. We are free. Me and Heidi were having a conversation about freedom. And I think if you're not feeling free in your work, you should ask yourself, maybe something's wrong here. Like, maybe it's okay for me to get another, you know, other stream of income, because the freedom that Christ gives us in our gifts are, you know, it's all encompassing. Yeah. Any other comments, questions?
I have a comment to make that was I was thinking when Tara was speaking, and yeah, first of all, Tara, thanks for talking about being an art teacher. I'm also an art teacher, and I'm in the same situation where, like, I love teaching, but it's such a catch-22, because it's like, yes, you get the financial stability, you know, and this could be applied to any other profession. You know, if you're working in gallery work or graphic design work, and it's not necessarily your first love, but it's bringing you some stable income, you know. So I think it's not just applied to teaching, but I think for me, yeah, teaching is part of the giving process, and I find it very life-giving. But I think also timing, this is what I wanted to say. Timing, when I was listening to Chris and Tara, I was remembering recently AD organized an evening where we listened to music. It was very beautiful. And one of the composers was Arvo Part. I don't know if I said his name right, but anyway, I absolutely love Arvo Part's work. And he had a long period of time where he didn't compose. And I kind of thought to myself, wow, why have such a drought? And what were you doing in that drought? And I also think that timing is a big one. You know, as a creative, you're going to go through different chapters. There'll be chapters for percolating and things growing, and then there'll be chapters for producing, and then there'll be chapters for selling, and then there'll be chapters of drought, where other parts of who you are as a person is growing and changing, and you might be doing something else completely. But yeah, I don't know, I just feel like we maybe shouldn't be sold the story that you should always be producing in the same way constantly all the time, because people have chapters, you know. Other part possibly needed that drought. Yeah, anyway, that's my thought.
I was lucky to have a Skype interview with the artist Bruce Herman, who's exhibited with Makoto Fujimura, and he's like all up in the arts and faith circles. And he gave me such good advice. Or it was so humbling speaking to him, because here's this guy who you've read about, and you know, he's doing some amazing work. And he said, you know what, AD, I can only make art for 3 hours a day. I can't actually do it the whole day. So I want to fill the rest of my time with other things. That was something that really kind of stuck out to me. And he said, you know, most of us have other jobs, or managing our art becomes a job, and that's fine. We've got, most of us teach as well. And he was super chilled about it and so humble about it. He's a lecturer at a university. And I think teaching plays a big part in a lot of our lives, whether it's later in your life, whether it's now and later you're moving more toward art. And resourcefulness, I think what Molida said. We actually need very little as artists. I think Carmen told me that, like, as an artist, we need very little to be able to do what we love. Because our identity isn't in other things. But we also get to help one another, because part of our resources, or part of our currency, I think what you said, Chris, is each other, and is connections and friends, or anyway, I'm babbling.
I'll say this. I think personally, like I can look back and see what a very important role like art teachers have played in my life since we're doing the Yay for Art Teachers thing, which I think is super NB. I had a couple of really great art teachers through school, and I actually had never considered art as a viable profession until I left school, actually. But once I'd graduated, one of my art teachers actually then approached me and bought a little series of drawings that I did as a matric student. And there was just something that like clicked in that gesture. Like she didn't buy them for a lot, or she just bought them, but there was this amazement that someone would pay for these things that I'd done as an act of like affirmation and validation. And obviously that's not the only way of being validated or affirmed through your work, but I just found that fascinating. And I think that this idea of needing little is also very, very interesting. There's a film that I watched as an art student at university called The 5 Obstructions, where Lars von Trier, who's kind of a very wacky art house director, I wouldn't actually recommend watching some of his films for your soul. But up to you. He approached his mentor, or the guy he looked up to when he was younger, a guy whose name I've forgotten, but he made a very obscure film called The Perfect Human, very art house, a guy sitting in a room like eating dinner, and a narrator saying, and now the perfect human is eating a meal, and now the perfect human is getting dressed, and very weird. But anyways, Lars von Trier got him in this documentary called The 5 Obstructions to remake that film. And every time he got him to remake it, he would give an obstruction. And one of the obstructions was to make it as an animation. The other obstruction was to make it in the worst location they could think of. And it turns out that the worst location that this director didn't want to go to was somewhere in like outside Calcutta. But the condition of that worst location was that he wasn't allowed to show it. But he ended up breaking the rules and showing a little bit of the frame and people peeking in and like just the kind of squalor of the situation. So the punishment for him was that he had to remake that film without any obstructions. And you literally see this like very established, world-renowned in his like field filmmaker having a mental breakdown on screen because he doesn't know how to remake a film without any obstructions. So creatively speaking, there's something incredibly fruitful about limitations, obstacles, and boundaries within a practice. And it's often when like you're faced with that white canvas of absolute unlimited possibility that you have no action at all. I mean, even William Kentridge like takes little charcoal dust and dusts his Fabriano paper before he makes a single mark on it, just to break up that white. So I think, shifting a perspective and seeing a limitation as an opportunity is incredibly powerful. And there's actually guys who have like promoted a saying, that's kind of a little trendy quip, but yeah.
Guys, it's 1:30. I didn't realize we have been going a bit over the time, but we're such a small group. So if you want to still hang around, you're more than welcome. I don't know, Chris, if you're in a hurry. But thanks all for coming and thanks for listening in. I think it was great to hear Molida. For those of you who missed the start of the presentation, we did record it. So I would encourage you to go listen to what Molida said at the start. She had some good gems and some scripture and some really cool stuff. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for
Thank
having
you
me.
all.